here today. And I'm going to recap everything that happened at Berkeley in case you missed it, because it was a lot of fun. I think that it was great. To lead off, I think that it's important to note a few things. First of all, there's a temptation on some parts of the left, on some parts of the more radical left, to immediately label everybody on the right a white supremacist Nazi to justify violence. Last night, the city of Berkeley and UC Berkeley spent $600,000 on security for this event. $600,000 on security. That's an enormous amount of money. They had 700 police officers out there lined up around the buildings. They had state troopers on call. Okay, they basically showed up with a small army. And the reason they did that is not because of me. I'm not a particularly threatening fellow. I haven't been in a fight since I was like 15 years old, 16 years old. Okay, the idea that I was going to show up at Berkeley and start shattering windows is utterly insane. But in order for some members of the radical left to justify the sort of activity that they've been pursuing for the last year, they have to declare that everyone who shows up in Berkeley who's slightly to the right of Glenn Greenwald must therefore be a terrorist Nazi sympathizer. So one of the people who said this yesterday on Twitter was a guy named Tariq Nasheed, who considers himself an anti-racism activist. Tariq Nasheed is also the dolt who put out an anti-racism organization with a logo that looked exactly like a swastika. And everybody on Twitter started laughing at him, and then he got sad and took it down. Anyway, here is what he tweeted. He tweeted, suspected white supremacist Ben Shapiro, who tries to mask his racist rhetoric by claiming to be Jewish, is in Berkeley now. Hashtag Ben at Berkeley. Yeah, there are a few things wrong with this tweet. Suspected by whom of being a white supremacist? By whom? Has anyone watched this show? Has anybody seen anything I've written for the past 15 years? Like, white supremacist? What now? And then he says that, I love this, I'm trying to mask my racist rhetoric by claiming to be Jewish. Man, what a long con I have going here. And I really play the part, going home and not turning on my phone on Sabbath and keeping kosher and all that kind of, boy, I'm very sophisticated in this con, because the best way to mask your white supremacy is to wear a yarmulke and keep kosher for virtually your entire adult life. That is the best way to do it. That's the best way. Claiming to be Jewish? Really? That's a thing? Patricia Heaton tweeted back at him and she said, I'm pretty sure he's actually Orthodox. He won't come to my Saturday night dinner parties until after sunset, and he won't eat any of my food. But everybody's a white supremacist, right? This is the way it works. Everybody's a white supremacist. Here are some pictures from the idiot left students who wanted to portray me as such yesterday. So they put up a giant sign in the student union across the way from the building where I was speaking, Zellerbach Hall. And here's what it says. It says, we say no to your white supremacist BS. We say no to your white supremacist BS. Which is weird, since I don't really spout white supremacist BS, and also I oppose white supremacist BS. But it doesn't matter. Everybody's a Nazi. Everybody is a Nazi. And why not? Then there are pictures of chalk, right? They were writing things like, F the police, F your donors, your free speech kills. Really? Who died yesterday? Anyone? If I had the power to kill people with my speech, boy, my life would be a lot better. And also, I would definitely be targeting people who are not at Berkeley. I'd start with ISIS. People were putting out F. Ben Shapiro, of course, which is, frankly, I hear that at the office all the time, so it's not that impressive. Also, free speech is not hate speech. Honestly, you should probably reverse that slogan. Hate speech is not free speech, because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense. Some free speech is hate speech and vice versa. In fact, there's no actual category of hate speech. That's something that you make up. There is hateful speech. My favorite is the pretty butterfly that they put up there. I really like the pretty butterfly. But there are some people who also chalked down the ground, Ben Shapiro is not welcome. If you can't get my name right, I'm sure Ben Shapiro would be very hesitant to come to campus. But I was not particularly intimidated by your chalkings. I'm sorry, but what did they think? That I was going to look, oh, there's chalk. Ooh. Some of my favorite other chalkings were the head of the UC Berkeley, the chancellor of UC Berkeley is a woman named Carol Christ. And Carol Christ, her last name is spelled precisely like Jesus Christ. And so there were a bunch of slogans that were written down like, Christ must go. And I just thought, that's going to confuse a lot of people. I'm sure that's how a lot of people at Berkeley feel, but that's going to confuse some people. So the protesters showed up en masse, and they had a lot of silly things to say. So here are some of the protesters shouting F the police, which is just a charming thing to say. These are the people who the left says are, a lot of the left says are just wonderful and nice. They weren't violent, so what they say is totally cool. F the police. Okay, so they're shouting at the cops. And then, this is my favorite, the protesters started chanting, "Speech is violence." People are laughing at them from down below because this is idiocy. Speech is violence. Okay, so then it's funny because they seem to be engaging in speech right there, but nobody was dying or being hit. Right? Speech is not violence, you stupid people. Of course speech is not violence. So because of all of this, as I said in my speech yesterday, the fact is that the speech is violence crowd are the people who lend all the gas for the tank of Antifa. Because Antifa says speech is violence, therefore they get to show up and burn things when people come and talk, which is just utterly asinine. And so Antifa shows up where a lot of these people show up, and there's some crossover between the two groups. Now, I want to get to show you the security arrangements yesterday because they truly were unbelievable. I do want to compliment Berkeley on their security arrangements. I think that they made some mistakes as far as crowd control with regard to people coming into the building. That's not the fault of the police, but they ruled out the top half of the auditorium. We had over 3,000 people who wanted to come, well over 3,000 people. There are a bunch of liberals who tried to claim tickets and then didn't show up. And instead of handing those out to a standby line of 150 or 200 people, the police instead seized the tickets. So the room, which would have easily fit 2,000, and we had 3,000 people who wanted to come, it ended up being about 800 people instead, which is the fault of the UC Berkeley administration. But the security was really amazing. And good for Berkeley. Good for Berkeley. Good for the PD. I can tell you, I was speaking to one of the police officers yesterday, and the police officers were basically saying, we have been waiting to be unshackled by the politicians for well over a year. We've been waiting for years to truly be told that we're allowed to do our jobs. We've been waiting for it. There's one police officer. I spoke to a bunch of police officers yesterday. There's one police officer. Thank you to all the police officers who provided a safe, secure place for free speech to flourish. One of the police officers said, I got to be honest with you. Like, if Antifa shows up, I'm not going to be disappointed. Because they were out in force. Okay, the police officers had been told that if they saw anyone with a mask, they were to immediately arrest them. Also, you were not allowed to carry weapons within a certain radius of the hall. So there were 9 arrests last night. It's amazing. The police is saying, well, there was no violence at this event last night. It was a peaceful protest. Imagine if there had been 9 people arrested at a Tea Party protest and what the headlines would have been. It wouldn't have been peaceful protest or largely peaceful protest. 9 people were arrested last night. This was one of the arrests last night. There was what Berkeley side called a big kerfluffle. A man shoved a woman and police immediately rushed in and arrested the guy. And there were 9 people arrested. I'll have to show you at some point the clips, the pictures of these people. They're definitely from among life's winners. They are some of the saddest looking human beings that you have ever seen. Here is the security was top notch, and it needs to be top notch because this is what happens. If you don't nip violence in the bud, it grows. And I hope that the security is just as good next week when the so-called Free Speech Week shows up, when folks like Milo and Bannon and Coulter show up. I disagree with them strenuously. I think Milo, as I've said many times, is a blot on the conservative movement because he's not particularly conservative and also because he's a provocateur and says some pretty terrible things. But does he have free speech rights in Berkeley? You bet your ass he does. And I hope the police provide him and the rest of Free Speech Week the same sort of protection that they provided me. I assume that they're coordinating. If they're not, then the police should make that clear. But obviously, if this is the sort of security that's necessary in order to preserve free speech at Berkeley, this is the sort of security that's necessary until it's no longer necessary. It has become largely necessary, again, because what Antifa likes to do is they hide in crowds. They use terrorist tactics. They hide among civilians, and then when the time is ripe, they pull a mask over their face, rush out, do violence, and rush back into the crowd. And then they take off the mask, and they take off their jacket, and then it's hard to identify them. The police were told right away, if there's a problem, you grab them. And that's exactly what happened. There was no violence. The speech went off just fine. And the speech itself, I think, was fun. I enjoyed it. I'll show you a couple of clips from the speech. You can go to our YouTube page where we've posted it, and you can watch the entire thing. There were over 100,000 people watching it in live time last night simultaneously. It already has well over 500,000 views. Here is a little bit of the beginning of the speech where I talk explicitly about Antifa. Thanks to Antifa and the supposed anti-fascist brigade for exposing what the radical left truly is, all of America is watching because you guys are so stupid. It's horrifying, I am grateful, and you can all go to hell, you pathetic, lying, stupid jackasses. So, yeah, I didn't hold back on them particularly much. I also went after the alt-right a little bit later in the speech, so the media is funny. There's some folks on the left who continue to maintain that I'm alt-right, which, again, you have to be an insane person to believe this. You have to be functionally illiterate to believe this. But I did spend some time going after the alt-right because that's the right thing to do, because alt-right white supremacism is idiotic and evil. I do love that there was apparently some girl who was asked by a member of the media about counseling, and here's what she said. She said, this is Sophia Lee Soyan, I think this is pronounced, and she is a journalist for World Mag. She said, just talked to a Berkeley freshman who said she'll be seeking counseling after Bennett Berkeley event. She's not attending his speech. Yeah, unfortunately, that's how it goes at Berkeley. But I think that it was a really valuable event. I think it showed the country that we can have civilized discourse, that we can all come out against violence, that we can all rip white supremacy together, that there are still points of unity in this country, and that you do have to let the police do their jobs if you wish to have a civilized society. You can't let violent people run around and then praise them as though they're the heroes of Normandy, when the fact is that they are nothing but a bunch of street thug morons. Okay, so what Berkeley, I think, was a great, I hope it was an optimistic point for people. It was an optimistic point for me. I think it was an optimistic point for a lot of folks, right, left, and center, who may disagree with a lot of the things that I say, but recognize that there are still rights to say things with which I disagree even on places like Berkeley campus. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.